people closest to the work often have the clearest insight in what's needed. And sometimes those real conversations are not going to be polished and clean. So until we shift that expectation, I think that fundraisers are going to kind of keep feeling like they have to kind of edit themselves to be effective.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and at IPM, our job is to make sure your organization is one of them. With each episode, our goal is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from across the nonprofit sector. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Russ Phaneuf. Thank you for joining me. This is a topic that speaks to the very core of why we do this work and why so often it feels like the work takes more than it gives. Burnout in the nonprofit sector is at an all-time high. Recent data suggests more than half of nonprofit professionals are considering leaving their jobs. And for frontline fundraisers, those numbers are even higher. Organizations often try to fix this with higher salaries or better benefits, which are important, but in many cases, that's misunderstanding the problem. In truth, some fundraisers are carrying a hidden burden they themselves might not have even named yet. And that's what we're going to talk about today. With my guest, we'll discuss how to identify the invisible labor that might be burning you out faster than your actual workload. The crucial shift from viewing your lived experience with a cause as baggage to viewing it as an asset, and what leadership needs to hear about supporting a fundraiser's identity to break the cycle of employee turnover. Joining me today is Sadé Dozan, Vice President of Advancement at Borealis Philanthropy. Sadé is a good friend of the podcast and has been a guest several times. We also co-presented last year at the Bridge Conference on the topic of ethical storytelling, and it was just a fantastic discussion. Welcome back, Sadé.
Hi, Russ. I'm happy to be here. Happy to keep coming back.
I'm so glad you're back. So, Sadé, you were the one to suggest this topic, so thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to talk about it with you and share it with our listeners. So what do you see as the challenge? I mean, I guess there's a number of different challenges that we could see in this, but can you kind of frame this issue for us?
I can frame it by actually talking a little bit about myself in this work. I think that that's how I approach it. So I am Black Latina. I am someone that has a disability. I am queer. And oftentimes I'm at the intersection of really everything, anything that's social justice involved.
Yeah.
I tend to kind of be at the intersection. And I've navigated housing instability. I come from a background where systems didn't always show up the way that they were supposed to. So for me, the work has never felt abstract. It's felt rooted in lived experience and reflective of the impact of my communities. So what I have always thought about is, what does it actually take for people and communities to have what they need to live and to be safe and to thrive?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have a deep investment in the work that feels so proximate to my lived experience. Really earlier in my career, I noticed that the closer you are to the work, the more often you then are asked to translate it, to reshape it into something that feels acceptable or fundable to institutions. And it can be hard to not just be fundraising, but constantly bridging between like lived reality and institutional expectation.
Okay.
So that's kind of been the pattern in the field that I've seen and wanted to explore.
So Sadé, what does it look like when a fundraiser has to translate their proximity into something that is more acceptable?
I mean, taking something that you know to be true from lived experience or community and shaping it into something that fits what a donor or an institution is ready to hear. I think that is really what I mean. So it might look like you've come from a conversation with your own family. Maybe it's a family member, I'm going to use the care example, who can't access care, who's a caregiver who's exhausted, who's navigating systems that are failing them in real time. They've been on the phone with Medicare for like 4 hours and they just still can't figure it out. And that reality is messy and it's frustrating and it's interconnected and it doesn't really have sort of like neat outcome. But then you go and you like articulate to the donor, you're kind of shifting the story. You're emphasizing like a hopeful arc or a clean wrap up or, there's like no complexity here. This was the issue and now it's solvable and it feels very neat. And it's not that you're being dishonest. It's that you're seeing yourself go, well, this was what gets funded. Clear KPIs get funded.
Right.
And although I know from lived experience that this money and this thing is just going to be one Band-Aid on the huge infrastructure build out we need, I'm going to tell you, yes, here's a 12-month program with clear deliverables, because that's what we're ready to talk about now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be an example.
And it sounds like it's really an interpersonal challenge, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The translation is actually where I find that a lot of the tension lives. And I think that actually has been part of the challenge is the weight of the translation.
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest challenge is that the constant level of decision making, like in the moment decision makings that often can kind of feel all or nothing, right? Like when you're in a conversation with a funder, with a donor, whether it be an individual donor or a program officer, it often feels like you have to make quick calls.
Yeah.
And how much do I say? What do I say? How do I say it? What do I soften? What do I protect?
Yeah.
How is this person viewing me in this work? And how do am I the right messenger in this moment for this person?
Yeah.
And, that's not just strategic. There's a level of emotional heft in that work, in that process. And it ends up that you're not just like telling a story that translates into dollars. You are living often that story and then holding people and relationships and the realities of it that actually don't really belong to the institution. They belong to you as a person with that lived experience. And then you're asking to kind of make it legible. That's kind of what happens. So it's the weight of it. Yeah.
How do you find that you protect yourself? Because that's an important thing, right? We're talking right off the bat about burnout.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find in your personal experiences that, if you've gone into situations that you've really put yourself out there, right? Maybe it's a funding opportunity where you really had to bring a lot of yourself into it. How did you protect yourself in those situations?
Gosh, I think I am still learning and unlearning how to do that.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Like what's enough, right?
Yeah. What's enough? Am I giving too much? Am I not giving enough? And
yeah.
I think,
right.
Yeah. I had this experience where I was working in care advocacy and I am and was a caregiver, so family sandwich caregiver. And there was a moment where I felt like everything was on the line all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes for me in particular, I had to really think about my own internal audit of where my boundaries were, what felt too heavy to carry, and what I needed to shift. So there are some ways that I think I did that, right? Like, at 5 p.m., no matter what, some days you just have to unplug. So I think that there's like the literal tactics that we hear. And then I think I also incorporated somatic practices, being really mindful of my breath, thinking about, am I showing up in a stressed state because I'm a caregiver and 15 things have happened today. And now I'm sitting in this room trying to convince someone that this work is real and needed. So like sometimes it is that level of being mindful of my own, what I am bringing into the situation and into the realm. But I think that I had to ask myself, what am I willing to hold? What am I willing to carry? What questions about my experience are too much for me? What questions am I willing to answer directly? And I think about what does it mean to fundraise in proximity across it? Like I think about folks that are directly impacted by heart disease and then go do like heart disease fundraising. Like, I think it applies quite broadly around how your personal experiences, whether it's an issue that's a little bit more distant from your day-to-day life, is that safer for us? So it's something that I really thought about.
Yeah. And I know, like, for myself, my son has autism, and he was diagnosed a few weeks before his third birthday. And, he's almost a teenager now. So it's been a long time. But in that interim, I've had a number of clients that are with autism organizations. And the first couple of times I did not mention that I had a son with autism, because I knew I would bring my experience to that work. But I felt like going in there and immediately, like during the pitch process or something like that, saying, oh, hey, I'm part of this community. I wasn't sure that first of all, like, ethically, I'm not sure that, like, raising your hand right away is the right thing to do. But I guess it depends on kind of where you are, right? And as someone who's in the work, you just have to decide, like, where am I? What am I willing to share? What are all those intersections? And what is the situation?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is the case for so many. I think that there's also the intersection between identity and experience. How much of my experience do I bring to this table? And then how much of my identity is visible that I can even remove from this table? Is that even something that I want to do?
Right.
I think that those are things that help us do our own sort of internal assessment of what feels good for us in a healthy fundraising environment, just from us as fundraisers, as individuals, before we even engage with an institution. And I think there's certain pressures that often make me kind of rethink how I want to do this work. And I make adjustments. Sometimes those adjustments are monthly, daily. Sometimes my boundaries shift from client to client, from person to person.
Yeah.
And I think at least being honest and in tune with it does help.
Yeah. And your capacity will change, right? Like,
yes.
it depends on what day it is, right? You might feel like a certain ability or capacity one day, and there might be another day where you're like, you know what, today's not the day.
That is true. Some days it's just not the day for me. That is right. Statement.
Right. So in light of all this, what do you think are some of the opportunities for nonprofits to kind of look at what's happening, maybe with some of their employees that might be going through this, for these nonprofits to kind of grow and improve from these experiences?
I mean, I think anytime you name something, you have an opportunity, right? So anytime you name attention, you have the opportunity to invite different types of conversations into that moment. So I think that when proximity is seen as value, when proximity is seen as something that should be trusted and not filtered out, it opens up these new ways of building. I've seen coalitions that form that wouldn't have normally existed otherwise, if not for a fundraiser at the center with the lived experience and the identity markers that drove that change.
Yeah.
And then I've seen nonprofits shift policies, make spaces different based off of how they were learning kind of from the field that ended up being in the house. Like, we sometimes say, like, programs are out in the field and they're doing things. But when you have a fundraiser that is proximate to that field, the call is coming from inside the house. It shifts the sort of nonprofit's ability to see things in different ways.
Yeah.
I've also seen, like, fundraisers shift frameworks and build out portfolios based off of fundraisers that were saying, yes, this is about our nonprofit, but it's also about my communities, my lived experience, my identity that has driven me to understand this work in a different way and create fluency around this issue. And I've seen fundraisers move mountains in institutions that they technically didn't have power within. So it's something that I think can really be leveraged in a positive way. So spaces, policy changes, it can happen.
And do you think it's that building that sense of ownership within the organization, and like that sense of, building out that portfolio and that sense of community? Is it that sense of, like really feeling connected to not only the work, but like this community of donors, this community where everything's connected, right? The funding's connected, the work is connected, everything's kind of, firing on all cylinders.
I think that it's similar to how we talk about with donor engagement work, the aha moment.
Yeah.
You have a conversation sometimes with individual donors, you'll be talking to them for like 8 months. We've met 4 times and yet still you're asking me the why, and then one day it clicks for them and they have like this aha moment.
Yeah.
I think that it's the nonprofit version of an internal aha, like your fundraiser, especially I believe for fundraisers, when your voice becomes more than a tool for resourcing, more than a tool for revenue. Yeah. When your voice is valued as that lived experience heft that becomes sort of intertwined with how a nonprofit moves. Yeah. It's a beautiful balance because it becomes then a tool for alignment and for narrative change and bringing people into something deeper. I think that only works if organizations recognize proximity as an asset, though.
So, Sadé, what might prevent a nonprofit from seeing lived experience or proximity as an asset? Would it be maybe lack of awareness, or is there maybe an active resistance against it?
You're making me have to choose.
or is it both? I mean,
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes it can be both a lack of awareness, and sometimes the lack of awareness can almost operate as a form of resistance.
Yeah.
I think that nonprofits actually weren't designed, like really no institution is designed to see lived experience like as an asset. We're kind of given these roles and we're like, do the role and do the skill set. And, so it by nature, the nonprofit industrial complex is created as a sort of like mechanism. So the design, I think, around the model of professionalism that values distance and neutrality and polish, because historically that's what donors have trusted, right? Like you have this sort of image of like the good fundraiser. And then when someone brings in proximity that complicates or creates gray space or has a little bit of, push for growth, it can disrupt that model. So I guess that question is it a lack of awareness or a form of resistance? And I think I'm countering actually that I think it's just the design.
Yeah, right. The old model is this machine that's meant to churn out money, right?
Yes,
it's meant to churn out gifts like on the line.
Yes. It's a system that is built to reward a certain kind of voice.
Right.
And we have not fully, like funders, nonprofit, like everyone has not fully caught up to the reality that people closest to the work often have the clearest insight in what's needed. And sometimes those real conversations are not going to be polished and clean.
Right.
So until we shift that expectation, I think that fundraisers are going to kind of keep falling and feeling like they have to kind of edit themselves to be effective.
Where do you find that those most authentic conversations happen at the funder level?
When there's a level of trust.
Yeah.
I have had donors that I engage with for several years. We do our quarterly check-ins and we're very nice. We talk about the weather and some kid went to college and we're like, yay, we talk about seasonal allergies and anything that kind of feels safe,
Right.
And then every once in a while, something will happen. Maybe they get a phone call from their doctor in the moment, or they say, it's my dad. He's kept calling me. And you're like, yeah, no, my dad's got dementia. And he forgets we just had this conversation 15 minutes ago. And then a layer of truth comes out and a bridge to trust comes out. And then you have one real conversation and then you invite realer conversation. And I think it happens on the one-to-one interpersonal level.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to replicate at scale in an institution.
Sure. Yeah. So in light of all this, what's a hard truth that nonprofit leaders need to face if they want to see this put into action?
I think it's the hard truth for everyone is that not every space is ready for a level of honesty that would challenge them to change. I think that that's just the truth of it.
Yeah.
I have entered as a client, like as a consultant or as a staff member, I've entered many organizations that just were not ready for change. And then that becomes kind of one of the indicators for burnout, right? Because fundraisers are like doing their best and they're moving as much as they can. And, you know, they're leveraging their own sort of personal experience in an effort to build more. And people just aren't ready for that. So I think for decision makers, specifically like board and leadership, there can sometimes be a real distance between what's happening on the ground or that sort of lived experience that informs it. And sometimes that distance ends up showing up as caution or control or as slowing things down in moments that actually require urgency, because, you know, they're not hearing the lived experience or they're not fully valuing it.
Yeah.
And as a fundraiser, if you're constantly pushing against a wall, sometimes the hard truth is you got to stop, you know,
Right.
like there are moments where you have to decide, is this a place where my proximity can actually shape something?
Yeah.
Is this a place where I'm being asked to translate and not be heard in the translation work? And then sometimes, you know, the choice point is this worth it? And that's a part of this work too.
Yeah. When you're in a situation like that as a fundraiser and you see that, you know, it's probably not going to work here for me, and you start looking elsewhere and you start to try to find another place to land, what would be some green flags that you would look for?
Yeah, I like to look at the intersection of tenure and joy. So not
good.
just like, I'm curious for organizations that have people that have worked there for like 5 years, 6 years and are happy about it. You know, I think that when you're interviewing the people too. So I'm curious around, why do you still work here? Like, you know, like, or do you feel like you're stuck, or do you feel like you have a little bit of joy in the work? So those are kind of things that I look for as I'm thinking about other places. I also do look at policies, right? Like I look at not just benefit policies, although I do love a good full coverage plan for health insurance.
Absolutely.
I believe we should have it. And
we should, yes.
I think that there are indicators of the type of workplace culture. If they have extended leave policies, if they have supplemental care policies, if they have things that indicate that they have already are in a habit of listening to their employees.
Yeah.
Because employees often inform those policies. So if you have robust policies that meet people where they are and their sort of lived truth, then you're more likely to be open to conversations where my identity can take up a little bit more space.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I look for.
Okay. So I think that's a good segue into my next question, which is about advice. If you have one piece of lasting advice for that next generation of nonprofit professionals around this topic, what would it be and why?
I'm always going to come back to boundaries. I learned boundaries way too late. Like, I feel like I started in fundraising, oh my gosh, like 20 years ago, like almost 20 years ago. And I wonder what my first 10 years of my career would have looked like if I had just really gotten my boundaries together.
Yeah.
Not just how I let people treat me, but really how I treat myself in this work and what pieces of myself I'm going to choose to give away. So I think that when your identity and your work overlap, there really is the question of how much of myself do I share and with whom? And those boundaries, like to your point, Russ, they will recalibrate frequently.
Yeah.
And being in tune with that and being truthful about it is something I would say all fundraisers need to have and hold.
So, Sadé, if I'm at an organization and I'm trying to keep my people, but maybe I'm not so good at it, but I want to be better at it, what's a way for me to kind of be looking for indicators that folks might leave?
Yes. Well, I want everyone to be good at it. So maybe you're great at it and you can always be better. So maybe yes, let's start there.
Yeah.
I would ask, who is doing the emotional and relational labor of bridging communities and donors?
Okay.
That's a lot of translation work. So who's holding that work? Because sometimes, yes, it's definitely the development team, but sometimes it's a program director who is talking to the donors, talking to the community members and bridging that gap.
Okay.
So I would really think about who is doing that sort of the invisible or emotional relational labor.
Okay.
And whose insights are shaping the strategies. Where is that voice, and perhaps where are some voices being filtered out? So kind of thinking about who's there and who's not.
And say I'm not incredibly in touch with my staff. How would I find out about that? The best way to find out about that? Like let's get down to brass tacks here.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you're seeing burnout, turnover, people pulling back, and these are things that you don't need to see on the ground. Like these are numbers that come out of HR, right?
Yes.
That is a signal that something else is happening and something deeper isn't being held.
Right.
And organizational leaders do have I would like organizational leaders to have a level of investment and hold responsibility for analyzing whether or not the people that are closest to the work are the decision makers and in those decision-making spaces. Or are the people that are closest to your work predominantly in storytelling roles without decision-making authority? Because oftentimes the lived experience decision-maker roles have a direct impact on the emotional labor that other members carry. So really that is one way that you could do it, is have maybe hard and difficult, uncomfortable conversations with decision makers around who is being asked to hold what and in what roles are they carrying that weight.
Okay.
Because those are the indicators. If you're seeing people like leave and you're like, why can we not keep a development officer for more than 18 months? That's not the like if it happens one time, you're like, okay, but if it's a rotating door, it's your org.
Yeah. What gives you the most hope right now about the future of fundraising and philanthropy?
It's changing. This change is happening. I think about the departments I used to work in. I think about how lonely I felt in this field. How few Black and Latina fundraisers there were when I first started, and how now I go to a conference and I'm like, okay, identity overlapping everywhere. Like I start to feel a little bit of joy that we are seeing more equity in this field.
Yeah.
We're seeing fundraisers treated like whole human beings and not just kind of like an ATM is definitely what I felt like earlier in my career. So when I look back at my career, I think about the change, although even if it's not linear, it is there. I can see shifts in what feels possible at the time. Conversations open up, funders evolving, language changing. So it gives me hope that in the next 10 years, we'll have something different. I think conversations like this are a part of it.
Yeah.
To not just talk about the tactics of fundraising, but to talk about what it means to be in this role. And for some of us to have built an entire life around this identity of being a fundraiser too. So
great. Is there anything else, Sadé, that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about?
I feel like we covered it, but I think if I could underline something, I want fundraisers, especially those that are closer to their work that they're moving, to leave knowing that what they carry has value. I think sometimes we think that we're holding up all of these rocks and why are we even doing this? And, like, why? And the proximity is not actually something to minimize or hide. It's a form of insight to the field that is very, very valuable.
Yeah.
So what you're holding matters.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd underline.
Awesome. Well, Sadé, this has been fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you so much. If listeners want to continue the conversation with you and reach out, where can they find you?
Yeah. Best place is actually my incubator. So Melanate is the name, Melanate. So just reach me, Sadé at, yeah, that's it.
Great. We'll include that in the show notes. So thank you again, Sadé Dozan. Thanks to our producer, Curtis Schmidt. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us today for this episode. And we'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you'd like to learn more about any of today's guests or resources, we'll include links in the show notes. If you like our podcast, please help spread the word. First, subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward episodes you like to friends and colleagues or post them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help share these conversations with more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners find us, and they also help us understand what you like most about NPFX. Finally, we'd love to hear your suggestions. If there's a challenge you're facing, a question you have, or a voice you think the nonprofit sector needs to hear, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. The Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange is just that, an exchange, and we're grateful that you're part of it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.